This is the Manga Mavericks podcast from allcomic.com, episode 20. We are a podcast dedicated to not only talking about manga as a medium, but as an industry. I am Colton.
And I'm Sid, and our special guest is not dead this time!
I know, he's not dead, which is great. So, we kind of mentioned it on the episode before, but on this episode of the podcast, we have special guest Casey MinovskyArticle. Hi, buddy, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great.
That's good. So, Casey, before we get on to the show proper, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Casey, better known on Twitter as MinovskyArticle. I talk about comics on the internet, and sometimes people like it.
That's great. I try to do the same thing, but I feel like your insight is usually a little more interesting, though.
Oh, no, I think the more insight that we can get from as many voices as possible, the better.
This is true. I do agree with that. So we brought on Casey for this episode because, I mean, by the time you guys listen to this, it'll have already passed, but we're actually recording this the day before Halloween, so it's spooky, or spoopy, as everybody on the internet likes to call it. So Casey is gonna basically go over some of his recommended manga horror picks, manga picks. Scratch that, switch that. So actually, but before we go on, so Casey, I know you're a pretty big horror manga guy, but I know you're just a fan of the horror genre in general, if I'm correct here.
Oh, no, you're absolutely correct. No, I am a fan of horror literature, film. I travel to go to haunted houses in different parts of the country. So yeah, I'm a horror fanatic, but I definitely latched on to horror manga, and horror comics in general. So
I know you've been reading a lot of titles in particular in preparation for the show, and we brought you on mostly because I think both me and Sid wanted to read at least something for the show and talk about it. But I mean, me especially, I think both me and Sid knew that, like, we probably weren't going to have a lot of time to read really more than one title.
And we read the same title, too.
Yeah, which we'll probably talk about that next week or maybe on this episode if we have time. I don't know. It's a bit...
I understand It's actually a title I haven't read that's legally available, so perhaps you can sell me on reading this title.
Probably. I guess just before we go on real quick, me and Sid both read Ajin Demi-Human, which is all available on Crunchyroll, and I believe is being sold physically from Vertical?
Yes.
I believe so, yes. So yeah, that was something me and Sid both ended up reading, and we originally wanted to read a couple of titles for the show, but then we decided, let's have Casey on, because he's actually, honestly, Casey's probably the biggest horror fanatic that I know, honestly, on Twitter at least. So Casey, of course, we wanted to have you on to maybe help recommend us, especially me, some horror titles, because personally, I'm actually not too big of a fan of the horror genre in general. Especially, I'm not a huge fan of horror movies, because horror doesn't really. Most horror genre media doesn't really scare me, and I don't. Sometimes I feel like I fail to really understand the genre and what it's going for and what its strengths are. And I was hoping maybe through your recommendations that maybe I can kind of get some insight on what you like in particular.
Well, certainly, I'll say this about horror: it's a matter of finding the horror for you.
Yes.
A lot of hardcore people like myself, we tend to, I don't think that many, really heavy horror fans are often scared of horror so much as we're just chasing particular aesthetics that we've grown up to love, or even just, I don't know, you're chasing a vibe more than you're chasing actual terror most of the time. Something will come along that actually scares you, and that stuff gets, skyrocketed and gets a lot of buzz. And the people who aren't as into horror go, I don't get it. Why is this such a big deal?
I'm starting to I feel like as I grow older, I'm starting to realize that I guess the what's the word I'm looking for? I guess the appeal. There we go. The appeal of horror. I feel like, especially when it comes to stuff on the Japanese side, is the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, you are always chasing atmosphere. I mean, I think that truly great horror, there's a lot of good horror, but I think truly great horror, for at least as far as my definition goes, is stuff that chases an atmosphere more so than a jump or a shock.
Yeah,
I think things that are just explicit to be explicit, and actually quite a few things on my list are going to be that way. So apologies in advance if I'm making this too pretentious and I deliver a bunch of gore picks. But really great movies and great literature and stuff is stuff that puts you in a moment and puts you in a vibe and generates dread. And for some people, that becomes very frustrating because perhaps what they're looking for is something to jump out and scream boo. Well, I've personally been in theaters full of teenagers on opening nights for horror movies, things like The Conjuring and Insidious, all these James Wan ghost movies that come out now, where most of the audience is just staring at their cell phones and they don't react to anything until something jumps out and screams, and then they're like, then they all jump and go, oh, that got me, and then they're right back to their cell phones, so.
You want an immersive experience. You want something that keeps your attention, keeps your eyes glued to the screen all the way through.
Exactly. And some of those movies I'm talking about, they can still do that. It's just, I think a lot of things are realizing that the audience is just grabbing you real quick and then letting you go again. It's unfortunate. It's a sign of the times. And this is not me lambasting millennials, because God knows I am one, and I'm always on my... all these times I'm screen capping manga and putting them on my Twitter feed. I only really have my cell phone. I don't even use a computer. So, I'm just taking photos of comics I'm reading and putting them online. Same. So, it's... Yeah, so don't let me sound like I'm too detached here. But, you're looking for an atmosphere. You go to a haunted house. I mean, sure, any haunted house can have a guy leap out of the dark at you and scream. But the really good ones have immersive sets and moments and feelings, and just, they really know how to work you beyond the jump. So, yeah, I think great horror is, as you said, the appeal in it is atmosphere.
But, we were kind of talking about this off mic. I was looking forward to what you had to recommend, because I knew that, I know, just to get it out of the way, because it's something we have to mention if we're talking about horror manga. I know that you're a huge fan of Junji Ito. It's been my icon on Twitter for forever. Tomio from the story Red Turtleneck, which you can read in Fragments of Horror, the current hardcover that Viz produced very recently. And that's a story about a young man who cheats on his girlfriend with some sort of witch, and she curses him so that if he ever lets go of his head will fall off. So he has to hold his head, and she proceeds to, fuck with him in various ways to try to make him let go of his head. So it's kind of a silly story. It's more played for comedy than horror, but it's rather explicit comedy. But yeah, we do have to touch on Junji Ito. Ito is the giant of horror manga. He's been published for many, many, many years now and has shown no sign of stopping. And I like Ito primarily because he produces short works. I'm really hard-pressed to think of any Ito work I know, and I'm sure someone will write in and let me know how wrong I am about this. But any Ito work I know that goes longer than 3 volumes, like what I'd recommend for Ito, and this is the most basic entry-level pick I could have given you, but it's Uzumaki. Uzumaki is it's what got me started on this path. I started buying these in 2001, back when Viz was releasing them as it's part of a line they called Pulp. I miss Pulp terribly. It was truly a line for adults. They had very subversive, unusual comics. It was the first place in the U.S. where Junji Ito was published. It was the first place in the U.S. that Taiyo Matsumoto of Ping Pong was published. They published Tekken Kinkreet. Back then they called it Black and White. They've since reprinted it. But yeah, Pulp was a magazine that sadly did not last very long, but they did print very provocative manga. I'm still trying to track a lot of these down, but sadly manga speculators have really ruined that market for me, so everything I want is $70 or more on the aftermarket these days. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Actually, I have, of the very little Junji Ito I've read, I have read Uzumaki. I read that particularly when I was still in high school, and I don't think I remember being very down on it, because back then I definitely was not a fan of horror, because back then I definitely didn't understand the appeal of the atmosphere. Definitely back then I was more like, horror doesn't scare me. I don't like this. Is stupid. So I was very down on Uzumaki, and I told my friend who let me borrow it, I told her, hey, like, I'm not really feeling it. And she, like, legitimately got upset with me and almost wanted to beat the shit out of me. And I was like,
and rightfully so.
Well, the thing with Uzumaki is, and the thing with Ito in general is, I don't necessarily find Ito frightening.
Yeah.
I find Ito's imagination, however, to be very interesting.
Yes.
Ito is very good at being able to create uncanny imagery that you really wouldn't see anywhere else or by anybody else.
Yeah, yeah.
You're more weirded out by what Ito produces, and that sort of generates some unusual feelings, but I don't know that Ito necessarily terrifies me. I think sometimes he revolts me a little bit, and I'm fascinated by that. Anything that can scratch this itch in my brain that isn't really fulfilled by other kinds of art, I come to horror for. Because horror can produce uncanny imagery and things that are so unusual that you're not going to see them in any other genre. So for Uzumaki, for example, it starts very simply. A man becomes just sort of vanilla Japanese businessman, and father figure becomes obsessed with the shape of a spiral, and it gradually consumes his life, and then literally consumes his life, and then everything spiral-shaped turns against this small seaside town, and manifests in completely unusual ways, at one point literally sucking a girl's eyeball into her own face in one of my favorite pages in comics.
I do remember that, yeah.
And that's an iconic image right there.
Oh yeah, that is that. If you look up Uzumaki, I guarantee that is one of the pages that will pop up. And you might very well if you Google image search some of these things, pull up my own Twitter feed talking about them. But Uzumaki I don't want to give anything away here. It manifests in increasingly over the top ways to the point where it's gone so far over that it's the point of no return. And I think that's what Ito really excels at. Is you start with a very simple premise, something completely mundane, and then it goes off the rails into this territory that nobody else is working in. Ito's interesting just because, as I said, he's been published in the U.S. since 2001, and yet most of the attempts to publish Ito failed. Viz did Uzumaki back in 2001. They also did Gyo later.
Yeah, I've read that one too.
Gyo is the series, of course, where fish and sharks sprout legs and start walking on land and then start rotting and then other things happen.
Just putting it out there, the OVA for that I think is terrible.
Yeah, no, it's not good. And I would even say that the Uzumaki live-action movie is fine, but I'd much rather you read the manga. A lot of Ito stuff gets semi-adapted in small, low-budget ways, but they're just not the way to go.
No, of course.
There's like a jillion Tomie films.
Oh, well, yeah, and that's because there's a jillion Tomie stories.
Yeah, those are great.
Tomie is, it's essentially collected, it adds up to about 3 volumes, but they're all a bunch of short stories about this beautiful girl who people get obsessed with or jealous of, and in their obsession or jealousy of her, they brutally murder her, and then she comes back again and again like a human tumor and drives people to madness. Cool thing about Tomie is, not cool thing, for me anyway, it's been published 3 times in the US, so I own 2 different copies, and I'm going to buy the third. Because the third is finally a prestige volume. Viz has really started treating new Ito books as an event.
Yeah.
They used to be very cheaply printed. Dark Horse tried to print Tomie, and they abandoned it pretty quickly. Comics One did some short stories, and they abandoned them. But now Viz is doing hardcovers, so there's a complete Uzumaki, and that is well worth your money.
Yes, I have that really well-made book.
There is a complete Gyo, which does contain Amagara Fault, which is very famous now on the internet. The Enigma of Amagara Fault. That really blew up on Tumblr, of all things.
Is that the one where people, like, crawl into holes or something?
Yes, there's a mountain with holes shaped like people, and they all seem to be specific to the person who finds them. And they, people start screaming, "This is the hole for me! This is my hole!" And they all kind of climb into it, and something shocking happens, and I'm not going to spoil it because if you haven't read it,
yeah, I've definitely heard of that, and I haven't read it myself.
Well, the good news is that the Gyo hardcover does contain that short story. So,
well, I need to run out to the bookstore and buy that right now.
So they do recognize that became a meme. And I do think that part of the reason that Ito is enjoying his current success in America, he's always been semi-successful in Japan, as these things go, although largely printed in magazines for women. Also, the guy was a former dental assistant. Before he became a big mangaka, he won the Kazuo Umezu Award for Tomie pretty early on in his career, then didn't look back. Very, very sweet, unassuming guy, too, if you see interviews with him. Like, you would never know that this man is a master of strange horror, or that he thinks the way he does. His studio space is like just barren and wooden, and like nothing about it suggests that he's a big horror guy. But except for his new pages that have like somebody falling apart or rotting or getting eaten alive or something. He's got a great imagination. Also, Tomie is getting a 752-page hardcover in December.
Yeesh. That
is all of the Tomie stories. Viz is printing everything ever done with this character.
Oh, that's going to be a huge book.
Yes, it is. It's rather massive, and I think it's running like $35 the list price. You'll probably get it for like high 20s on most online stores.
Honestly, that's pretty fair.
And it's not just Viz that's getting into Ito now. Like I said, they also did Fragments of Horror that was published over the summer. That's a bunch of short stories. Now also Kodansha published Cat Diaries, Yan and Mu. It's a semi-autobiographical horror comic from Ito about living with his wife's cats.
I know, I've seen that around. That actually looks really interesting and really funny. I do want to read that.
That's a fun book. And he brings his typical style into it and really, really exaggerates the cats in horrific ways. It's fantastic. And also we're getting, in January, I believe from Vertical, Dissolving Classroom, which is literally a series of stories where a classroom of people dissolve into, like, piles of ooze. So, yeah, you're going to want to get those.
I keep confusing the Dissolving Classroom with the Drifting Classroom.
Yeah, me too.
We'll get to that one later. We will.
Actually, something I want to bring up real quick that I had just thought of while you were talking. Something I think kind of on a different tangent here, real quick. Something I think that I didn't realize about horror until really recently, because I'm sure all of us have seen. I forget the guy's username on YouTube, but the same guy who did that the Fall of Bleach video, which I think is a really interesting video on Bleach in particular, but that's neither here nor there. He also did a really interesting video on Junji Ito and the horror genre in general, what makes it so appealing. And I think something that actually I was thinking about Uzumaki again, something that I think at first turned me off about Uzumaki and just horror manga in general is that I think I was turned off by Uzumaki at first was because this particular person who made this video explains that in horror, there's no real need to because a lot of horror anime also does this as well. I'm starting to notice that like horror anime at first is usually, the very few that are out there that are produced are usually pretty good at the start, but then they start like explaining things and the mystery because of that is sort of gone when you kind of know what's up. But one of the appeals of horror is that you don't really fully understand what's going on. And I'm starting to realize that's kind of an appeal of horror too, that I didn't really understand with Uzumaki because I was probably disappointed with it at first because I was like, oh, they're not going to explain anything that's going on? Well, this is stupid. But now I kind of understand that, like I said earlier, one of the appeals of horror is also that you don't really know what's going on, and that's supposed to kind of feed into the atmosphere, into how you feel about when you watch a horror movie or read something horror in general.
Yeah, the suspense is always more interesting than the reveal. Like what your mind can imagine and what you think about why things are, or like you can imagine like something more horrifying than what actually will be. And so the best horror always like feeds your imagination and keeps you guessing. And I love horror stories that always leave it a little bit to your imagination, that don't ever fully explain everything perfectly, and still leave you with questions, and still leave you a little unnerved, a little in doubt.
Yeah, I'm very glad you brought this topic up. By the way, that I believe that person's name is Super Eyepatch Wolf.
Yes,
the person who makes these videos. I haven't seen the Ito video, but they're exactly right. And that was actually a topic I was planning to broach because you're right. A big part of what makes horror work, and this is something that Ito excels at. Well, not actually. I take that back. Ito does it in a different way. But a big part of what makes great horror work is the suggestion of things. It's giving you a glimpse of something and then not showing you everything, like not explaining everything. And that's when I'm going to go off on a slight rant again because I brought up the movies of people like James Wan who make Insidious and Sinister, and I think he didn't make Sinister, but Sinister's Wan-esque, and Conjuring. I think Wan is. I'm both frustrated and fascinated by Wan because I think the storytelling choices aren't always there because in his movies, and I feel like this might be a studio notes kind of thing. They feel the need to explain everything about the monster to you. You're gonna know the demon. You're gonna know the demon's name. You're gonna know how to beat it. You're gonna know its weakness. And I think that's why a lot of the old monsters don't scare us the way that they used to. We know all the rules. Mm-hmm. And horror fans love rules, but at the same time, rules are very frustrating in creating something that's new and scary. Because okay, to beat a vampire, I put a stake in its heart, or I get it out in the sunlight. To beat a werewolf, I get a silver bullet, or something silver to stab through it. There are things about these monsters that make them less intimidating and more familiar.
Yeah.
And I think once you step into familiarity with monsters, and I think the least scary thing in the world is a monster with a weakness. Especially a known weakness. It sends audiences home satisfied, or when you finish the book, you go, well, okay, that monster's not there anymore, and that's not scary, and I'm not scared of it anymore. But the thing that you can't beat is far scarier. The thing that's beyond you and that you can't totally comprehend is scarier than the thing that you know and can sum up and can easily can easily talk about its origins, its what it is, and how to beat it in a single paragraph. That there's nothing there anymore.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of horror movie franchises, the longer they go on, the monsters get less interesting and less scary. As the Halloween series goes on, are you really scared of Michael Myers anymore? Heck,
no.
Once you learn that he's the brother of what's her name? As soon as you've learned that, then again a whole lot of the creep factor of him in the first movie is taken away.
Yeah, as soon as they say, "Oh, he's related to Jamie Lee Curtis," you're like, "Really?" But it was never meant. But it was never meant to be that way. I just saw Halloween in a theater 2 days ago, and the original movie, they don't tell you really anything about Michael Myers.
And that's why the original movie is so frightening because you don't know what's up with this guy. He's just a crazy serial killer who's after these people for no reason. It seems,
and he seems very unstoppable too.
Absolutely. And it happens to all of these big franchises. Horror that becomes a franchise becomes horror that's so familiar, and it does less and less for you. I still enjoy a lot of these sequels to Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and stuff, but a lot of them don't work the same way once you know what this thing is, once it's become a familiar friend rather than an unknown enemy.
And the characters kind of become a joke after a while too. Can you really take Jason and Freddy seriously anymore after a certain point?
Freddy literally doesn't take himself seriously past the first 3 movies. He becomes this jokester, who wears a Nintendo Power Glove and puts on sunglasses at the beach.
I guess at least with Freddy, he's still kind of a fun character.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, Freddy's still a blast because you can do so much with the dream powers. And he's still got charisma. But it's the same with zombie narratives now. Mm-hmm. A lot of zombies have moved away from being this thing that we're afraid of, and these metaphors for consumerism and the Red Scare and all these other things that they used to stand for, and now it's become an other that's convenient to kill. There's a lot of political baggage to unload with zombies, and I'm not going to do that right now. I'll save that for a different recording at a different time.
We'll save it for the I Am a Hero episode.
Well, we're going to talk about that one too. So, but with zombies now, it's more about how do you kill a zombie. Zombies are fun now. Walking Dead is less about the zombies anymore, and more about how will these people kill each other, and how will they kill the zombies this week. And that's all well and fine. I still follow and like zombie things, but it's a different genre now. So let's hop back to Ito and what Ito does differently. Ito presents you with something uncanny, the shape of a spiral, a witch that's cursed you so you can't ever take your hands off your head, fish that sprout legs. Those are, and I'm just talking about legally available Ito. We'll get into not legally available Ito in a minute. One of my favorite examples, and again, when I say we're in the Ito Renaissance, it's true. Anything you can't legally get, people have translated on the internet now. There are scans of almost every Ito thing. And if they're not, I'm sure they're being produced as we speak. One of my favorite examples of a strange Ito story is The Hanging Balloons. It's a short story about this town of people waking up one day, and they all go outside, and outside of their houses are balloons with their heads with nooses on the bottom that chase them relentlessly, hang you, and then fly away. And you can't beat the balloons, because if you pop the balloon, you pop yourself in graphic fashion. And they have voices of the people they've killed. They want to lure you outside with familiar people they've already hung. And there's no way to win. It's a hopeless story with a thing that's completely inexplicable and makes no sense, and it just works. Because how horrific would it be if something like that happened? And it's unwinnable, and it's something transgressive and strange to bring into a totally mundane setting. That's the same reason that Stephen King works. Stephen King puts these unusual things out, but it's all small town Maine. It's any town America. It's it's taken out of Gothic castles and it's brought it into our living rooms. So yeah, that's what horror is. Horror is still the things we talked about, the familiar things, and I enjoy many of them. But horror is also weird horror. The horror that really still works on me is stuff that builds the atmosphere because we can't explain it, we can't beat it, we don't know the laws by which it operates. And, compare other weird horror to Ito. Ito is very graphic and showing you exactly what these things are going to do and exactly what they are, but you still don't know what they are. There's no explanation for them.
There's still an air and mystery to things.
Yes. You don't know why this is happening to you, but you better believe it's happening and there's nothing you can do about it.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas other really effective horror stuff that I'm going to talk about later does the same thing, but does it in a way that you just get a glimpse of something. You don't, it just builds dread by showing you very mundane things or creepy atmosphere, and then you'll maybe get a couple panels to show something really quickly. You don't know what the heck that is. A good example in movies is the films of David Lynch. Lynch, does totally off-the-wall stuff, but out of nowhere, for a character, this horrifying character will wander into the frame for a minute, and then they're gone, and they never come back, and there's no explanation for what they were, meant, or why they did what they did. And it sticks with you because you can't explain it. So Ito, so much Junji Ito is available. I know we're taking up a lot of time, so I'm going to move on to the next one. But I can't recommend him more. I love him. He is the king of strange horror manga.
Yeah, I feel like people who even people who don't read a ton of horror manga even know enough about Junji Ito and have probably had enough exposure to him and his works. He's probably the most well-known horror manga artist out there, I would say.
Yes. Oh, certainly. So I guess we'll kind of jump down to his senseis real quick, or the people that, the people that came before him. And then we'll move on to some unusual choices that you can read online and in print. So, I'm going to jump around real fast. There's, of course, Kazuo Umezu, who is, probably Japan's most famous. He's this very, very charming old-timer. He's still around. He always dresses in his red striped sweaters. He's responsible for a lot of really great horror shorts, some of which are very effective and some of which make absolutely no sense.
Isn't he the author of what is it called, Cat-Eyed Boy or something? I think that's the title.
Cat-Eyed Boy is one of his that was released in the States. A few of his were released in the States. Most of them are out of print at this point.
Okay.
But yeah, Cat-Eyed Boy was out. Then there was stuff like Orochi. Orochi Volume 1 was printed, and that's sort of a almost soap opera-ish horror drama.
Interesting.
And that they didn't print all of that. They kind of came and went. I believe that was also part of the pulp line.
Okay.
And then there's stuff like, there's short stories, and there are titles like Scary Book. But of course, one of his most famous works, and you can get most of this in the States still, is The Drifting Classroom.
Yes.
Which is about an elementary school that just disappears one day and reemerges in another dimension full of monsters and awful stuff outside, and
wow,
people treating each other very terribly inside. So it's a very uncomfortable to read manga sometimes. So it's these teachers, these children, and these whoever was stuck in the school at the time, all trying to just survive for several volumes in this awful place, and it's people being horrible to each other, it's people getting eaten by monsters, it's just whatever awfulness Umezu could think of. And for as kind and charming as Umezu himself is, he is very unkind to his characters. It doesn't matter if it doesn't matter, men, women, children, you're all gonna die. You're gonna be butchered horribly, you're gonna be ripped apart, it's gonna be rendered in extraordinary detail sometimes. But he is a fascinating artist. Although, oddly enough, I believe he's better known in Japan, or at least as well known in Japan as a humorist. So one of his famous creations is Makoto-chan, which is just this kid that gets diarrhea all the time, and sings about poop. That's
wow.
But that's Umezu. Love him to death. Unfortunately, Drifting Classroom, a lot of the early volumes are pretty easy to get. But this is, again, this was something that Viz printed back in 2006. So most of it's available on Kindle still, thank goodness. Because the print volumes, you can get volume 1 and 2 for $7, $10. But then you get to volume 5, 7, and 11, I believe those are the ones, because I've been trying to buy this recently. But then you get to books that are $70. So it's the curse of all out of print manga. Random volumes are just way too much.
Yep.
But yeah, Umezu's great. God, there's another series of his that's rather infamous, and it's all fairly poorly scanned online, but it's a strange delight.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
And that is 14.
Yeah.
14 is a manga that takes place in the year 2200. And it is about a lump of chicken that transforms into a superhuman named Chicken George. So one day, one day a lump of chicken from a meat factory grows into a man. So he's a humanoid with a chicken head, and he's trying to fight for his rights, but he also murders dogs and other things. And literally, I can't even hope to explain this to you. It is 13 volumes long.
I think it's 20 volumes long, actually.
It's a lot. I sporadically tweet about it. I'm still making my way through it. But it's transformed from a series about a chicken that turned into a man to an environmental horror story, into demons are everywhere, and everybody that dies becomes demons. And one of my favorite panels from this comic is as the world is ending, there's a page where a woman just screams, "Please, Mr. President, legalize marijuana." It's a dying planet where all the plants have turned against humanity are dying, and everyone's dying and demons are everywhere, but the only thing we need is for the president to legalize pot right now. It's there's any reason to care about that at all. Just do it, man. There's nothing left.
We might as well. We're gonna die soon.
Yeah, it's extraordinarily strange.
I wish you could see me right now. I've been in constant awe ever since you even mentioned it. This is kind of amazing.
It's an incomprehensible mess. Another page I love from the beginning of the series is this guy's girlfriend comes home, and she's like, why is there all this blood in the room? Hey, there's 2 dead dogs in the toilet. It's just one question answers the other. But
so basically, any other day at Araki's house, right?
Exactly. Yeah. This is Araki is the world's greatest pet murderer.
I would love it if this was just an autobiography of Araki.
Yeah, we don't really know what he does behind closed doors beyond draw manga till he dies. So, I mean, there is a secret to him staying young. Whether or not that was convincing the president to legalize marijuana or drinking the blood of children, I don't know. But
I mean, how do you think he stays so young?
Yeah, Araki is an immortal. But yeah, so read 14 if you want to mess, or just watch my Twitter feed, because I will be tweeting more about this series and probably hashtagging it under 14. So
both sound pretty entertaining.
Yeah, so just it is an incomparable nightmare mess, and I love it. So moving on, there's also another artist who's enjoying a bit of a publishing renaissance in the States, and that is Shigeru Mizuki, best known for Gegege no Kitaro.
I love the theme song for that series.
I tweeted about this the other day. I'm over here looking for something to read for Halloween. Little do I realize months ago I bought the first prototype English volume of Kitaro, and I'm like, wow, I could have just read that. Why didn't I read that? And I feel kind of dumb now. I should really get to that at some point, because I have been really interested in reading some of Mizuki's works for a while now.
Yeah, Mizuki is almost more than a mangaka in Japan. He is. I know he is like he's like a cultural icon over there. He's massive. Recently deceased, rest his soul.
Yes,
but he was a huge cataloger of yokai stories and stories about monsters and ghosts. He gathered all these things and redrew them and did his own manga about them in monster encyclopedias. And there's all these charming stories about Mizuki running around in his 60s and 70s, going to places like England and looking under rocks to try to find fairies. He's a man that lived to a very old age, and he said the secret to success was eating hamburgers every day.
Wow.
Yeah. He lost his arm in World War II, learned to redraw with his other arm, I believe. But yeah, so he's also written, since we're talking about horror, real world horrors, he's also written a few stories about his war experiences.
That's Showa, I believe, right?
Well, Showa is his semi-autobiographical stories about the history of Japan from before World War II to relatively modern times. So it's through his own life, things he saw going on around him. There's also one more specifically. It's semi-autobiographical. Not everything in it is true. There's another book these are all been printed by Drawn and Quarterly, and yes. They're translated by the #1 Mizuki superfan Zach Davison. But Onward to Our Noble Deaths is his other war stories book that's available in English. Also, there's Nonanba, which won the Angoulême French Award for Best Comic a few years ago. And that is Mizuki's story about the old woman that lived with him and his family, who told him all the ghost stories that he grew up with.
Oh, that sounds really cute.
Yeah, it's a fairly sweet book. Has its sad moments, but yeah, it's just more stories of his childhood, and then of course his most famous creation, Gegege no Kitaro, which is about a one-eyed demon boy and his father, who is literally his missing eye, who hangs out with him, and all the silly monster adventures they get into together. Gegege no Kitaro is important to me because it was when I was first getting into anime. Obviously, I'd seen things like Robotech and Voltron and Sailor Moon, and I didn't know. Well, I didn't see Sailor Moon yet, but I didn't know that those things were different than other cartoons. I just assumed they were the same as any cartoon. There's no special distinction between anime and US produced materials. And one of my older cousins he had posters of Akira and stuff in his room. But the most memorable thing for me was that he had these tapes he got from a Japanese pen pal of some sort, and they were recorded off the television, old school anime.
Wow.
They were in Japanese, so I didn't understand a word, but he put them on, so that's how I saw a random episode of Lupin the Third, and that's how I saw an episode of Gegege no Kitaro. So I always wanted to know what that one-eyed boy thing was, and eventually I found out. But that trying to find these things was part of my early journey into being an anime fan. So,
wow.
But yeah, they're gradually printing a lot of Kitaro, so please support those efforts if you're even at all interested, because I'd really love to see Drawn and Quarterly get a lot of that stuff out here. But they are a small publisher, so they could really use your help.
Yes.
Okay, so let's now we've covered the sort of the semi-Mount Olympus of these things. We've also touched on earlier. There's a lot of mainstream stuff that fits the horror category. You have your Attack on Titans. You have your Tokyo Ghouls. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has a lot of horror elements.
Particularly Phantom Blood.
But there's stuff that goes on later that would not be out of place in like an Ito manga.
I mean, Araki himself is a huge fan of horror movies, and you can see a lot of those references and homages in Part 3, Stardust Crusaders in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so there's a lot of mainstreaming. I'm going to talk about a few that aren't necessarily horror, but have horrific elements. One of the ones I really like is Naoki Urasawa's Monster.
Yes, I've watched a lot of it on Sci-Fi, and then I never got the chance to finish it. But from the little I've seen, I totally love it.
Oh, you Philistine! You gotta read Monster.
I know. I want to get back to it. I really do, because I don't even remember how much I watched of it. But again, like, that's actually, Monster was one of the few anime that like I got my dad to watch, and like he doesn't really like cartoons much at all. But then again, he also ended up watching stuff like Soul Eater and Bobobo, which I don't know how that happened. But
Monster, Soul Eater, and Bobobo, that is definitely an eclectic array of anime that you randomly got your dad.
A friend of mine actually did the same with his mom. I think her the only anime she's really into are Voltron and Monster. But she went to a con with him and dressed as she made an outfit out of the story page books from the Nameless Monster children's book.
Oh wow!
So it's
you guys had cool. You guys knew cool parents. My mom, the only anime my mom ever liked was Naruto.
Sid, if it makes you feel any better, I think the one anime that my mom has ever showed interest in was School Rumble, and that's about it.
School Rumble is good, though. I like School Rumble.
Yeah.
My parents have no interest in any anime at all. I think my dad begrudgingly liked that I liked Sailor Moon because at least to him that was proof that I also liked girls. And I am bisexual, but still, it was to my dad was well, at least I know you like some anime, babes, if nothing else, so
yeah,
it's
you go watch them skimpy clothed girls, son.
Yeah, although my the same coin, my stepmom once tried to have an aha moment with one of my volumes of Ranma One Half that I used to buy because there's nudity in it. She's I see, there's nudity. Is that's why you're reading? I'm no, not really.
Wow.
But it is what it is. But yeah, so I think that's a perfect example, though. I think Monster is a story, manga or anime. I watched the anime first. That's one of the rare cases where that was true of me. And now that Viz is thankfully publishing all of the manga, I can read that as well.
They did publish it before, but now, they put it out in omnibus form. So now it's
it's now 9 volumes instead of the high 20s or whatever it was before. 18. There we go. Yeah. So. So it's a great series, and I would recommend that one because it is quite accessible, as you said, even for people who don't like anime or manga. I really liken it to Urasawa doing kind of a Thomas Harris Silence of the Lambs / Hannibal kind of thing.
Yeah.
By the way, Hannibal, the TV series, is anime. I don't care what anybody says. It is very anime. I mean, at one point you even have Hannibal and Will Graham saying Nakama to each other, in one piece.
Are you serious?
Yes, I laughed so loud when that scene happened. It's in season 3, but and they even have a Japanese character come in to define what Nakama is.
I wonder what the One Piece podcast guys would think about that.
I've sent it to them. They know. But it's fantastic. And they even kind of define it the same way that really insistent fanboys of the translation do, where it's a friend that's bigger than family. It's a very important friend. But yeah, so if you like thrillers, this is a really great thriller. It's set in 80s Germany, and it's a doctor who saves a child who ends up growing up to be a really vicious serial killer. And the doctor feels personally responsible, especially as the serial killer comes back into his life and keeps ruining his life and frames him for murders and puts him on the run. So it's several volumes of him chasing this individual and the other associates who he draws to himself in a cult-like fashion. So he's running around 80s Germany, and it's very, very interesting series.
It's the ultimate good versus evil story.
I wouldn't quite put it that way, but yeah, it's really.
I really would, because the entire conflict of the series is this moral question about will Tenma kill Johan? Will he
Yeah, will he reduce himself to that level?
Is that the right thing to do? And the series grapples with that moral question, that moral dilemma Tenma faces, that conflict, because Tenma is kind of like the ultimate, I would call him like the ultimate superhero in a way. Like, he is a really good person. Like, he is driven by doing good, and so that's why so many people don't want him to shoot Johan. They don't want him to, like, leave a black stain on his moral character, and like, swelling his soul and stuff. So and Johan is kind of like this completely amoral, like this completely cold, calculating, evil creature. He is kind of like the embodiment of like pure evil. I think a true monster in human form, and I definitely would say it's like a real good versus evil story.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, Johanna is an unabashed sociopath, and you're right. The big conflict of the series is not, when will he find him? It's what will he do when he does find him?
Yes.
So it's fantastic though, and there's a great children's book in that called The Nameless Monster, which gets referenced a lot. So I'd recommend that one highly. There's another author who I think does a really great job with horrific elements, but doesn't necessarily write horror, and that is Inio Asano.
Oh, yeah.
Inio Asano deals more in existential horrors, though, than flat out, what we'd consider in the horror genre. Particularly, I'd look at things like Oyasumi Pun Pun, which is translated as, I believe...
Good Night Pun Pun.
Good Night Pun Pun, yeah. I just bought the first volume of that. And then also Nijigahara Holograph, which is available from Fantagraphics Books. Goodnight Pun Pun is all released in 3 omnibuses by Viz.
Well, I mean, they're still continuing to release. It's a pretty long series.
Yeah, but Asano does. And I caution to call these horrors, but it's truly existential horror. It's people brought to their most despairing, lowest points. Like even something like Salanine, which is ostensibly a story about a girl starting a band, is still a story marred by very deep personal tragedy and depression, and how life can change in an instant, and it'll haunt you forever. So it's these are definitely books I would not recommend if you're like, I don't know. It depends on how engaged you are with sad art, because I am always depressed after reading Asano books, but I love them.
They're always about depressed people who undergo some really tragic things in their lives. Well, they're also all coming-of-age stories, so generally by the end there is, like, it does leave off on this moment of optimism, this moment of moving forward in your life.
Generally, but not always.
Well, Poon Poon goes to some really disturbing places, but, the ending...
Nijigahara Holograph goes to very violent places. Like, it's... And then not just, like, physical violence, but also, like, sexual and emotional violence are part of these things. But I think they're very powerful works, and I think they're important to talk about in this context, because, it's not all ghosts and rattling chains. It's how horrible can things become, and can you endure it?
Yeah, I honestly, even as a high schooler, I feel like as turned off by horror as I used to be. I feel like even as a high schooler, I found that kind of horror a lot more interesting because it was a little more relatable.
Mm-hmm. Sure, and I think there is certainly a place for all of those kinds. Because I love Inio Asano. Probably the most explicit, transgressive artist I've talked about so far. You can read Nijigahara Holograph, you can read Salanine, you can read Goodnight Pun Pun. These are all available in English. Mm-hmm. They are very mature titles in their way, so be forewarned. But I recommend them with the highest recommendation. But just know that this is a very cynical mind. There definitely seems to be quite a bit of depression within Asano and within Asano's works.
Yeah. But it's by the end, generally.
Oh, no, yeah, I agree. No, there is still very uplifting things about, about coming into your own, but just the journey to get there is very rough.
You gotta go through a lot of heartbreak to get to the happy ending. But yeah, I mean, I've recommended Poon Poon several times before. I've been very happy that it's been successful in English. I've enjoyed, like, all the other Asano works I read. Definitely among my favorite mangaka. He's a great artist. Like, his works have the highest recommendation for me as well.
If you haven't watched it, Urasawa has a show called Urasawa no Manben where he...
Oh, yes,
we've mentioned that on the podcast before.
Well, there is an Inio Asano episode. Mm-hmm. It's pretty fascinating.
Yes.
Check it out. Okay, so moving on. Another legally available as of recently comic is I Am a Hero by Kengo Hanazawa. Dark Horse has taken it on themselves to print this in omnibuses. I don't know how well this is doing for Dark Horse, but I hope it's pretty well. I've only read what's available in English so far, so I can't tell you, what's going to be or what it becomes. But at least in the early going, I'm really fascinated by this series because it's maybe one of the most negative betrayals of otaku I've ever read.
Wow!
In a comic ostensibly for otaku, it's like we have a lead character who is I believe he's in his 30s or nearing his 30s. Who is somebody in Japan who owns a gun, is part of a gun club. He's got a relationship that's not really going anywhere. He's a manga artist's assistant, but can't make the break to writing his own material. And he deeply resents the world around him. He's paranoid. He's a very unreliable narrator in that he seems to have quite a few hallucinations and things so we're never sure. Even he's not sure when he first starts seeing monsters if he's actually seeing them or if he's just freaking out again. But it is a zombie story. It is a Japanese zombie outbreak story. Although these zombies don't work by traditional rules, they're much stronger and faster and more twisted. But this asks a really interesting question, and I'm told there's a scene about this later, and I can't wait to get to it. But there's the question of how would people on 2chan handle a zombie apocalypse? and Hanazawa really doesn't seem to like nerds very much.
Wow.
There's some very raw feelings about some of the people that inhabit the more seedy corners of the web, and you've met them. They're usually eggs or people with certain kinds of viewpoints, but he doesn't really pull any punches with these people. And some of it will feel like self-reflection on yourself, perhaps. You'll see some of your own negative attributes, and some are so over the top that you just hope that no one's really that way. But as a zombie apocalypse story, it works. Hanazawa's got really interesting artwork. It takes a little while before you get to the apocalypse in the story, because they're really building up how awful this main character's life is before the outbreak, and how some people would just jump into this situation and think of it as a second chance or something else they can do and be important now. So it's a really great series so far. It's fairly long now, so I don't know if the end game will be worth the start, but as of the start, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I bought the first volume of the series a while ago because, Jason Thompson really endorsed it, back on House of Atansa manga a long time ago, and that really intrigued me. So, I bought it, when it came out, the first volume, but I haven't gotten a chance to read through it yet. But, yeah, it's definitely a series that seems totally up my alley. I really like slow burns. I'm really interested in, the take on this character and this, commentary on, otaku culture. It seems he's doing with otaku culture what Romero did with consumerist culture in his Dead films.
Yes, this is a very Japanese take.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to an upcoming license I'm actually really excited about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so recently Dark Horse announced that they were going to publish H.P. Lovecraft's The Hound and Other Stories, the manga adaptations by Go Tanabe.
Oh yeah, we did. I think we reported this a little while ago, didn't we?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Tanabe is a fantastic artist who draws really beautiful gothic settings and monsters. His monsters look incredible. So I'm really excited to see these in print. I hope this leads to more, because The Hound, The Temple, and The Nameless City are very lesser Lovecraft works, and Tanabe has since been branching off and publishing manga about more better-known works, like The Color Out of Space, The Haunter of the Dark, and I believe as of September has just started working on In the Mountains of Madness, which is probably one of the most famous stories. So I'm hoping this does well so we can see more of Tanabe in English. But I did want to touch on, because I feel like I can't bring up Lovecraft in Japan without just saying I'm always sort of fascinated by Japan's love affair with H.P. Lovecraft. You know, in general, modern horror is really in love with Lovecraft, and there's definitely some good writing there, and there's definitely a person who brought together what we refer to as cosmic horror and helped weird horror. This kind of horror I was talking about, where it's a hopeless situation, and you don't ever entirely understand what it is you're confronting. But Lovecraft himself was a humongous racist, and in particular, Lovecraft hated every race. Like, it's not just like he hated a lot of the white races too. Just they weren't white enough for Lovecraft, and a lot of his viewpoints were born from this sort of thinking. Like, I don't want to get too deep into this, although I have been doing some research. I'd eventually like to assemble a weird horror and cosmic horror and anime and manga panel for a convention. So in that research, I did find a letter that Lovecraft had written to a friend of his, where he said that he wanted Japan to be he wanted the nation of Japan to be exterminated before they became a problem for white people.
Oh, wow!
And this was pre-World War II. So I am fascinated that his work has kind of endured and become so adaptable in Japan, but it is clearly a case for many people of love the art, hate the artist, and I think that's more than fair in his unfortunate case. But anyway, moving on. But you know what? I'm not the biggest fan of Lovecraft the man. I like some of Lovecraft the work, and I really like Tanabe Go's Lovecraft works. So go check those out. They're great adaptations. Moving on let's talk about some unlicensed stuff. Some stuff that you can find on the web. Particularly, I'm going to name a few like short works. So maybe if you get them, you can just look at them real quick. Some of these are less than a few pages, and some are just a few chapters. Some a couple volumes. So let's start with what we mentioned. Umezu already. There was a story of Umezu's that got remade recently and became a slight viral sensation for a little bit. It was redone by Hisashi Eguchi, who is an artist. And that story is called Fasting. It is 20 pages long. It is about an overweight girl who gets dumped by a guy that like a guy that she thinks is really handsome. And while he's dumping her, he makes fun of her weight and says that why would you think I'd ever want to be with someone like you? The bit where she starves herself for so long that she becomes beautiful, and then he's into her. And I'm just going to spoil it. I mean, because it's only 20 pages. He gets into her, and as soon as she kisses him, the fact that she hasn't eaten in all this time kicks in, and she just eats him alive.
Wow.
So it's a story with a purpose. It's girl power. You can eat the man that rejects you alive.
Sounds like something from Frankenfran.
Yeah, I haven't read Frankenfran yet, and it's a lot of my good.
That's a great horror comedy. It's blackjack as a horror comedy. It's really great.
I'm into it.
Yeah.
I'm into it. I'm definitely going to check that one out.
Yeah, I'm interested in the title you mentioned. Hisashi Eguchi, he did Stop Hibari-kun, which is a classic Shonen Jump manga about actually transgender character. So
really,
yeah.
I haven't read any Eguchi yet, so I'm going to have to jump into that one.
Yeah, it's real cute, real funny, real cute series. Surprisingly. It's politically incorrect, but surprisingly progressive. So,
yeah, it's very rare to see a shonen manga that tackles that kind of thing with any kind of tact or sensitivity.
Well, it's a comedy, but the joke isn't on Hibari for being transgender; it's on everyone else because the main character is still attracted. So it's like he doesn't know how to contemplate his feelings. So. But Hibari is portrayed in a very positive light.
Excellent. All right, let's talk about next. We'll talk about Kakizaki Masasumi's Hideout. Hideout is one volume. It is about. I'd actually recommend this for anyone who likes this sort of things like Silent Hill. It's about a man who commits a terrible crime, and that he's lost. We're told he's lost his son, or that he wants to keep his son, and he murders his wife and leaves her in a cave. And he sort of, for the next 8 chapters, he enters his own private hell, which becomes very surrealistic. I recommend this one because the art is so good in this one. The use of ink and black and white space is fantastic. Like some of the panels really blew me away, especially the stuff in the caves. Like I don't know how Masasumi did it, but very recommended highly. It's a very bleak story, so don't go in expecting anything light. But Hideout by Kakazaki Masasumi, it's real good. Check it out. That's one of the ones I read in preparation for this, and it just really took my breath away. And some of the ink work that was going on in there.
Actually, I was actually kind of interested, and I saw you live tweeting a lot of these titles that you were going to mention. I was particularly interested in Fuan no Tanae.
That was the next one on my list, so I'm glad we agreed.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, that is by Nakayama Masaki. Fuan no Tanae is interesting. It's a few volumes long. It's meant to be like ghost stories or urban legends or superstitions. He tends to organize them around themes. Actually, he or she. I don't actually know this artist's gender, so I'm sorry to say. They tend to organize them around certain themes. So, like, there's like, here's stories about going on a walk, and here's all the things that could happen to you on a walk. Here's stories about going, about making eye contact with somebody you shouldn't have.
Those all sound very relatable so far.
Monday situations that go totally awry.
But the best thing about Fuan no Tanae is they go totally awry in 5 pages or less.
Okay.
Every Fuan no Tanae story is a very few pages, and it very much is in the category of horror of the totally unexplained and unexplainable. Like, it's a couple pages of mundane setup, and then something really strange happens, and the story ends the second the strange thing happens, and you don't know the outcome, you don't know it's just... It literally is an urban legend, probably told by a friend of a friend, and to that end, Nakayama uses a lot of caption panels, where he'll just say, like, October 10th, 9 p.m., 1997. And there'll be somebody in a school who's... I'll use the opening story, one of the ones I posted. There's a story about a girl who's alone at a school, and they're closing up things, and they're by the lockers, and they tell the story about this thing that 5- and 6-year-olds say that they see, and it's something they call the Playful Man. And the Playful Man waits, but can't enter the school for some reason. And it's this thing with a bag over its head with this silly drawn-on face that just says, "Let's play." And it stands beside the lockers, and it just tries to lure kids to it. And by saying, "Let's play," and if they come outside, we don't know what happens to them. But this teenager runs into it, and it's like, "Can you come inside?" And just keeps yelling, "Let's play, let's play, let's play." Like, and the story just ends on its face. Like, there's a lot of bizarre faces, or people, it's very relatable. You're just walking down the street, everything is normal, and you turn and make eye contact with this ghost with big eyes that is obsessed with you now, or is going to follow you home, or is going to chop off your ear. Like, it's so small. These micro stories, some of the punchlines are kind of silly, some are like, I'm noticing a theme emerging here. But I think that Nakayama Masaki is really good at just that sudden glimpse of an uncanny image to make you uncomfortable, and then before you can even adjust, it's on to the next story.
Yeah, I was going to say that this sounds fairly comedic so far.
Some of them are comedic, and some of them are the thing that Nakayama drew is so horrific looking, or just unsettling in its vagueness, that it might actually be a little scary. I know some of these things have become reaction images on certain corners of the web, certain ghosts and monsters. By that hand, Fuan no Tanae's artist Nakayama also has another series called Koisho Radio, and Koisho Radio is the same as Fuan no Tanae, and that it's very short stories that end very suddenly. I haven't read all of Koisho Radio. That's my current read. But from what I've seen, the things drawn at the end, the punchline scares, are more horrific looking than they were in Fuan no Tanae. So yeah, really recommend Nakayama's work. These are works that you can get in and out of very fast. I would recommend that you read them at night.
Yeah, I think all of this should be read at night. That's the best time to read horror. And watch horror. Experience horror. The night is when it's dark and you're all alone.
Turn out the lights, yeah.
That's when the atmosphere can really get you.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the atmosphere to get you.
Mm-hmm.
There's also Battle Royale, which was released as a manga by Koshun Takami and Masayuki Taguchi. I'm not going to say a lot about that one. If you've seen the movie, you know the story of Battle Royale. Kids on an island forced to fight each other pre-Hunger Games. But post Lord of the Flies, so, let's not start on who inspired who. But
wow.
Battle Royale, the manga is much more explicit than the movie was, and Tokyo Pop released all of it at one point. I think you can probably still find the hardcovers out there somewhere if you're really looking. Another quick one, Jisatsu Circle, which is literally translate to Suicide Circle, which got a film adaptation in Suicide Club, which became fairly famous and infamous among people who like this kind of stuff for a while. And that is about a club of Japanese schoolgirls. This is by Usamara Furyu, who does a lot of very unusual, cynical work about the state of the country of Japan.
Yeah, I think I might have actually seen his works around from time to time.
Yeah, some of it's been printed, some of it hasn't. Various.
If I'm correct, I think this person in particular actually had one of his works previewed in the American Shonen Jump at one point called Genkaku Picasso.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, that was fully published over here.
Yeah, I remember when print Shonen Jump was still a thing over here, and they actually had a preview for that, and I remember reading that and not understanding it at all, because I'm pretty sure I wasn't the right age to really, appreciate something like that. I thought it was weird and really dumb, but I don't know. It's something I'd like to maybe kind of explore again, because, again, it's another one of those things where I probably like it. I probably understand it and maybe appreciate it a little bit more now that I'm older. Because, obviously when I was younger, I didn't really have an appreciation for manga in terms of its, I guess from a perspective of its art or whatnot.
If you don't know how to take it, then you've definitely read Furuya. I think that's the proper reaction to the stuff that he produces.
Okay.
It tends to be very. There's comedy to it, but it's kind of gross comedy. There's sex to it, but it's schoolgirl sex. It's more subversive.
I think he also did that one series called Hikari Club something. I forget what the name of this off the top of my head.
That would be Lychee Light Club. Hikari Club. Yeah, I actually have not read that one yet, and everybody tells me I'll love it, so I have to wait. I'll report back. But
I'd be interested in what you think, because I know nothing about that series, and I've been seeing that around for years now, and I know nothing about it.
The designs look great, but yeah, I know that's a very strange one, and I'm looking forward to getting to it. Jisatsu Circle, and again, content warning. I do like to say, especially because it is about suicide. Jisatsu Circle it's most known, I think, for the movie version, Suicide Club, where over 50 schoolgirls in the very opening scene gleefully jump to their deaths. It's about some person with a contagious effect who convinces all the other kids in their school to kill themselves, and then just is able to survive somehow and keep going at it. So they just keep ending up in new places and doing the same thing, and so it's very cult-like. I can't say it's a full recommend for me, but it's definitely an interesting thing, and I know, again, because this picked up Steams and some of the darker corners of the web, if that's your kind of thing, check it out. So let's get to a heavy recommendation for me, and I think this will be a good point to say, if you guys want to talk about more horror manga in the future, I'll be glad to come back on and give you some more lists. But a series I really love is, and I'm still reading this one, is Yuureitou.
Yeah, I've seen you tweet about this one. Yeah,
Yuureitou is, gosh, it's not legally available. I wish it was. I don't know if this is the kind of series that'll get picked up by anybody. I describe it as the psychosexual boy detective story I never knew I wanted, but I can't live without.
Huh, okay.
Even saying a lot of it is giving too much away. But it's about this character. First of all, it's about Amano Taichi, who is a NEET. There's no better way to say about it. He's someone who doesn't leave his house and doesn't really have any skills and is looking for work and ends up accompanying this mysterious person named Tetsuo, who is, for all intents and purposes, this very attractive boy detective who takes Amano on these very vivid murder mysteries involving ghostly clock towers and mysterious villages and things. What separates Yuureitou from any other comic of its kind, though, is that Tetsuo is a trans man,
Oh, okay.
And it's handled in a very interesting way, and the potential unusual courtship between Amano and Tetsuo is an interesting thing to see play out. It does get into some very uncomfortable territory, as one of the villains is... I'm just going to say that there is a masked slasher type character that seems very sexually possessive of Tetsuo in a very unnerving way, and that the mangaka is really amazing at rendering slasher type scenes, things like a Dario Argento movie or other European slashers that people love. So I don't want to give too much away, because this is really a series I would love people to discover on their own. But I do feel like it handles its horror and it handles its trans issues in fascinating ways. This one has really been sticking with me, and I've purposely been pacing this one out because I don't want to run out of new chapters, because it is complete. It's got one of my higher recommendations on the show, and it's just a very different kind of series. It's probably my biggest surprise I've read in a long time.
Wow.
Well, yeah, that's like I said, that's definitely something I've been seeing you tweet about for a while, and I don't know, you seem to really, 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 really love it. I feel like I'm going to have to give it a chance at some point.
Yeah, just be prepared. Like I said, there is some vivid graphic content in there, and there's some uncomfortable stuff. But I think if you're used to like the darkness of Asano, it's about on that level, but on more of a psychosexual level. That's the best way I can put it. But yeah, I would encourage you to try it at least.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested.
It is a period piece. It's set in the 50s.
Okay.
So its portrayal of these issues is even more interesting because it's not. Okay, and the artist is Nogazaki Taro. Yeah, so read some Nogazaki Taro. Get yourself in there.
All right, there you go. I think that's about all we want to discuss for right now, right?
Oh yeah, I'm just gonna say that there is an amazing assortment of short horror manga online. If you want, you can come to me at any time. I'll be happy to pass on any of the stuff I find. There's also a humongous boom of interesting comics and horror webtoons coming out of Korea right now, of all places. And I haven't explored that enough to talk about it, but that's something I'm keen to be looking at very soon. But yeah, I had a great time talking about this with you guys.
Oh yeah, thank you. I mean, you made some amazing suggestions. Like, I have to check some of this stuff out that I haven't read. Yuureitou in particular.
And honestly, I felt like this was a pretty good discussion of just the horror genre in general, which is not something I really get to have with a ton of people. I feel like I really learned a lot today.
Well, I am always happy to be either of your windows into this at any time, so just let me know.